So good afternoon, welcome everybody to the breakout session on the EOSC Partnership Priorities 25-27. It's 2 o'clock and I would like to start this session here on the EOSC priorities. As you have heard in the presentations during this morning, we are currently working on the MAR, the Multi-Annual Roadmap 2025-2027, which includes different objectives which we hope will be covered by the future infra-EOSC calls. And Karel will present the MAR with the objectives, how we developed the multi-annual roadmap, and this will be also matched with a presentation from Ilira, from Graz University of Technology, to present the macro roadmap. As I mentioned in my presentation this morning, the macro roadmap has mapped all the outcomes of the infra-EOSC projects on a timeline, and she will present the process, how they gathered the material and how we can use the macro roadmap to get an overview of what's going on in the different projects and how they contribute to the development of the European Open Science Cloud. The format for this session here is as follows. We have the two presentations. First, Ilira and Pantelis from the Commission. In the case of the macro roadmap, Pantelis will start, and then Ilira will follow with her presentation. That topic, macro roadmap, will be followed by the presentation from Karel on the multi-annual roadmap. Here, Karel will start with a presentation from the perspective of the EOSC Association and our membership base, and then Pantelis will continue with his input from the perspective of the European Commission. The talks will follow one after the other, and after the second talk, we will enter into a panel discussion. So we are here to listen to you. We will not have a panel among the four of us here on stage. We would like you to raise your questions, your comments, and then we will comment or answer your input. The format is as follows. Those who are here in the room are invited to raise their hands, take the microphone, and just ask the question. So there's no need to use Slido. We want to have it interactive here. Those who are following us on Zoom, they are invited to use Slido, and we will take the questions from there and bring it up to the panel. That is the structure of the presentation. This is how we designed it, and at this stage I would like Pantelis first from the European Commission to start with his short input to this panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Klaus. So I'm Pantelis Gerologlu. I work at the Open Science and Research Infrastructure Unit in the European Commission. At this stage, I will only say a few words, just a couple of minutes, to introduce the work that the EOSC Association and the EOSC Focus have done in developing the macro roadmap. We find this as a very useful tool. There was a need from the European Commission as the infra-EOSC projects were developing and producing results from one side, and from the other side, the additional activities of the EOSC Association. There was an increasing need from the European Commission side to try to see how we can best have an overview of what results are produced and how they compare to the different action areas that we have identified in the strategic research and innovation agenda of the EOSC Partnership. And we were in contact with the EOSC Association and the EOSC Focus colleagues, and we're very happy to find out that you were doing a similar thinking at that time, that you were also thinking about developing a tool to bring these different elements together. So we're very happy to be able to contribute to this work. We see this as a very important deliverable, let's say, of the partnership as a whole. The tool is excellent. I had the chance to play a bit with it's already online. And it is not only important because it brings together from the European Commission side this visualization of how the different results can be grouped under the different action areas of the SRIA. This is important for us as we are now moving towards developing the next version of the SRIA to see what has already been delivered by projects and by additional activities of the EOSC Association under each of these action areas. I think it's also a very useful tool for the projects themselves to see what other projects are delivering within the same thematic area. So it would be a very good tool for better coordination, let's say, amongst the researchers of the different projects. And without spending much more time on this, I would like to pass the floor to Ilire. We will have more time to discuss about the SRIA in the next session.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me good? Yeah. Thank you for the very nice introduction, Klaus. Thank you, Pantelis, for these kind words. And I will share my slides, if that is possible now, and move through them. I don't seem... Yep. Yeah, so the macro roadmap was mentioned already today in the morning, and with these nice introduction words, you can imagine what we are aiming to do with this tool. First of all, the macro roadmap is a tool for the whole EOSC landscape, so it is a tool for all EOSC stakeholders, and we wanted to show how different EOSC-related Europe projects, but also EOSC Association members, are contributing to the implementation of EOSC over time. With this tool, we wanted also to identify gaps in the EOSC implementation priorities and also facilitate collaboration. We heard that there is a lot of fragmentation in the whole landscape, and we want to make sure that different stakeholders are collaborating together in order to make sure that this one EOSC is implemented and aligned. This is a joint effort of EOSC Association, as already mentioned also by Pantelis, EOSC-related projects, which was facilitated by EOSC Focus, but also European Commission. And we have these two inputs that are already planned to be shown in the macro roadmap. We just heard today that the input from task forces will be included as well in the future. So this diagram will look a bit different. But we have results from the EU-funded projects. We have in-kind contributions from EOSC Association members. We will have task force deliverables. These all will be visualized in this macro roadmap. But how to make this happen and which framework should we use? Of course, we have the EOSC Partnership Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, and when we planned this work, we focused on the SRIA action areas. The macro roadmap will be further populated and, of course, continuously updated. This will be done by EOSC Association and facilitated by EOSC Focus. How did we come up with the results that are visualized in the macro roadmap? We first run interviews with 21 and 22 infra-EOSC and related projects. So we interviewed 18 projects, and in these interviews, project representatives took part. We wanted, during these semi-structured interviews with some standardized questions, we wanted to find out which synergies, which technical challenges, but also potential gaps do the projects face. And we wanted to map these with EOSC partnership objectives. One of the outcomes of the macro roadmap is also to showcase how projects' contributions are contributing to the development of EOSC. So we did this mapping of project results to SRIA action areas. We presented the first draft of our mapping to the projects, and then they had the possibility to validate our captured results. Based on their feedback, we reviewed and refined the results that are now shown in the online tool. In this point, I want also to thank all 18 projects for their commitment, for their engagement. We had a very good collaboration in the last months, and we were able to have validated results just in time, just before the EOSC symposium, in order to make sure that those results that are visible online are also the way of presentation that projects also agree on. Those results that you will see online are, of course, only one part of the outcomes that we had during the interviews. Those deep conversation with project representatives, they allowed us also to dive into the most important implementation challenges and also technical challenges that projects are tackling. We were also able to capture the alignment, the existing alignment with projects, between them, and also with other initiatives. We also have a mapping between the projects and EOSC Association task forces, and we gathered also information on sustainability plans that projects have in their roadmaps. As an outcome, we have established now a framework that we will be using for technical collaboration between the projects. So this is also an activity that is going on in EOSC Focus. All this information that we captured during the interviews now allow us to go more into details and to identify these tangible aspects that projects are working on, and to find ways how they can collaborate, not just on a higher level and not just discuss which challenges are they facing, but go more into technical details, let's say on a task level of each project, and bring together these communities so that they can work on solutions together. This allowed us to also foster more cross-project alignment, and this will be followed up in EOSC Focus project. On the other side, we want to capture also the contributions from EOSC Association members. And how do we want to do this? We will get the first input, the first information from additional activities plan. And this is already planned in the survey that is ongoing, and we heard that the deadline is extended until end of September. So for AAP for 2024, there is an additional question where all the members can indicate which contribution can be included in this macro roadmap. So there are up to 2 case studies that members can provide information for, and if they agree that these results can be shown in the macro roadmap, then after the analysis of these survey results, they will be included there. How does it look like? So you can access the macro roadmap through the EOSC Association website, so eosc.eu/roadmap. And this is just a preview here. As you can see, on the left side, we have 3 implementation challenges. So we have implementation challenges like EOSC interoperability, fair metrics. If you expand that part, you will see that, or PIDs. Then we have also boundary conditions like landscape monitoring and engagement, skills training, or widening to public and private sector and going global. We have included also grand societal challenges. To navigate through the roadmap, of course, you can use these 3 action areas, but you can use also the timeline. We have results now for years, for upcoming years, and for each quarter you find also specific results. You can navigate through these arrows shown here, and if you want to have a look at the specific results, then you just expand those by clicking on this plus icon. This is a preview. If you go deeper into implementation challenges, then you see titles of specific results. To find more what is included in these project results, again, you can just click on those plus icons. Like, for example, bringing row crate to technology readiness level TRL 9 is one of the project results, or EOSC PID graph. And if you click on those two, then you will find a description like this. So you have the title, a very short description of the result, the problem that is tackled by this outcome, the type of result. In this case, for EOSC PID graph, we have a service. We provide a link to the website of the project where you can find more information around this specific result, and of course, the project who is delivering it. Similar, you can find more information about row crate, which is a product in this case. Projects are, of course, allowed to include more than one link in order to make sure that all necessary information is provided there. Or we have a result around virtual research environment, for example, for marine research. This is an outcome from Blue Cloud project, and this is type of result, it's an infrastructure. There are also reports or recommendations and other kinds of deliverables included in the macro roadmap. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay. So what is next? We want to work on including AEP activities, as already announced, and we aim to have like a very first release, which is more complete by beginning of 2024. But of course, this can be seen as a living document. So as new projects are granted and are starting, we will make sure to include their results as well. There will be a web form established for content updates, so projects can go and update their own results automatically. There will be also a joint publication where not only the end results are shown, but also we want to provide more information that we gathered from the interviews, and this joint publication will be done in coordination with EC. And we will make sure that we reach out to the new projects that will start next year, and we organize interviews with them as they kick off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elira. We will enter the broader discussion after the next presentation. Still, I would like to check if there are clarifying questions from your side, which Elira or Pantelis should answer at this point in time. Do we have clarifying questions from the audience? This doesn't seem to be the case, so there is one.
How did you reach the cutoff date of early 2024? So why stop? What was why did you choose the end date at that time of collecting?
2024 is about additional activities plan. So for the survey where EOSC Association members indicate how much do they plan to contribute in 2024, we will include those results that we will capture now with the survey that is running until end of September. But the date, we didn't stop in the roadmap in 2024, so it's until 2028.
Yeah. Okay. Any further clarifying question? This doesn't seem to be the case, so I would like to hand over to our next speaker, Carol, the president of the EOSC Association, talking about how we produce the MAR and what is the content of our draft.
Thank you, Klaus, for the introduction. And if I can have the first slide. I will talk about the multi-annual roadmap 2025-2027. And this is looking into the future. What Elira told you is the present and the past. And of course, the present and the past will in the future be the past or the future will be in the past in the future, whatever you call it, and then that will be included in the, let's say, macro roadmap. The macro roadmap tries to capture everything that is done, that has been done, and this is a proposal to the Commission, part of our MOU task, in order to come forward with the work program for the next period, the period 2025 and 2026 plus 2027, as I will say. So the multi-annual roadmap is part of the strategic innovation and research agenda. It sets priorities for this given period, and the MAR informs the work program which is to be defined by the Commission. So the Commission takes this advice on board in order to work on their work program. Under development is, as I said, 2025-2027, with emphasis on 2025, because there will be a new Commission coming after a year, as we all know, and therefore there is a separation, maybe not therefore, but there is a separation between 2025 and 2026-2027. So in the next iteration, we will concentrate on that. And the survey version you can find on the web. That was the version of the MAR that was before the survey. By now we have a draft MAR which is after the survey. How was it developed? We started by last year asking our task forces what needs to be done in the period 2025-2027. We reviewed those and came up with a list of priority topics. We gave those to the Commission, and they were discussed in the end of 2022. The board then worked out a preliminary text according to this, and this text with priorities split into the 3 objectives of the SRIA, making open science the new normal, standards and tools for EOSC, and the federated system of EOSC, as well at the national, the European, as at the institutional level. Further iterations were made again with bringing this back to the task forces in a meeting we had on the 10th of February in Brussels, and then receiving their input again based on that. A finalized draft finalized, that is not the finalized document, was agreed on with the Commission for consultation and put out in March or around March, and the consultation period was from 7th of March until the 24th of April. The processing of that consultation, the G is missing, I see here, started in May of this year, and then a draft version we agreed on in our board on the 4th of August, and that was delivered to the Commission on the 1st of September. Already on the 4th of September, I had a reply from Pantelis. Thank you very much for that. An initial reply, and that initial reaction we are now working on, and we'll have further contact with them. The discussion with the community is scheduled for the 20th of September, and the final draft is going to be delivered in October, the beginning of October, in order to be integrated in the SRIA, Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. This is a document the partnership board, so the Commission plus the association, have to agree on, and the MAR will be part of that SRIA, and therefore we call it SRIA 1.0, based on the 1.1 version we have now. Next year we will work on a really new SRIA. Adoption of that MAR will take place hopefully during the General Assembly number 7 in November, 21st of November, which is an online General Assembly of the Association. And then finally we can put forward the SRIA 1.2 to the Partnership Board in December. Some numerical results. We had 7 mandated organizations and 42 other members that replied to the survey. In total, and 8 observers, in total 57, of which 34 were research performing, 7 were research funding, and 19 were service providing organizations, with a certain emphasis from the service providing organizations, which is also what you would expect for a document like this. And there were others in a small group. In total, we had 652 comments on the document, and on top of that, we had 7 additional feedback documents. And we have used all of these to update the SRIA. Nevertheless, a lot of what was in there in the draft at that moment was agreed on. If you look at the blue and the red part, the European, the national institutional level, in this case for Objective 1, coming to open science to be the new normal, you see there's a lot of agreement with what was in the draft. And if you include the green, where people said, well, it's okay, we have no preference, then you come close to 100% even. The same holds for Objective 2, setting the standards, the tools, and the things that are suggested for that second objective. So this is a response to how do you agree or not agree with the objectives, with the priorities we set for these objectives. And the third one is the objective to make this federated system work and to create a federated system. Slightly lower, but still a very high agreement with the priorities we set. And if we then look at the agreement with the outcomes, so we also wrote in the multi-annual roadmap what we think the outcomes will be or could be. There, again, we found a large agreement from our audience, from our community, with the outcomes we would expect from the different general objectives. Again, open science as the new normal, standards and tools, and the federated system. I abbreviate, the sentences are a little bit longer, but then you have an impression on what's GO1, GO2, and GO3. Then the question was, to what extent do you agree with the priorities we set for the years 2025? We have lined out in the multi-annual roadmap specifically what is for 2025. And again, you see a huge agreement. There is actually nobody answering that they didn't agree with the priorities we set for 2025. Yes, it's a set of priorities. That means other things are important as well. And yes, it's an advice to the Commission. That means that you can bring in other sources, not only the association as well. So this doesn't mean that this large agreement will lead to a one-to-one copy of these priorities to the work program. If we then look at the different groups of in our audience that responded, then if you do a statistical analysis, you can conclude that there was no difference between the observers, the members, or the mandated organization with respect to the amount of agreement. They all were around the same level of agreement with respect to those priorities. Now, I have 4 minutes left, and I have 2 slides with a lot of lines for you. This is a compilation of the national priorities, and I will go through them very quickly, so you have to read them afterwards. You will get the slides. But this is what we suggest for the national work to be done in the different nations, aligning with the European curricula for data stewards, establishing cost of data management as eligible, leveraging the national competence centers, showing use cases from the public sector, promoting and sustaining the spreading and use of PIDs, integrating widely used and adopted PIDs into the national services, supporting and incentivizing the adoption, maintenance, and of open standards and APIs, establishing and operating national and regional EOSC support for data and services, adjusting the national priorities, supporting the NRANs and the national grid infrastructures with respect to the AAI they are offering, acknowledging the European and domain-specific semantic catalogs to be used by the different organizations, and supporting the establishment of last resort data repositories for those to support European and national data access. The same supporting repositories to become machine actionable, a very important one, as was mentioned already this morning. If it's not machine actionable, then we cannot really use it also for AI. Compilation for the institutional advices. So if you read these advices and these priorities we suggest for the institutions, then you think about universities, research institutes, and other organizations, offering core open science, fair, and care training, ensuring research support staff to have the required skills, engaging in competence centers and networks for data stewards, so bringing these people together, again, also the research software engineers, adjusting research review mechanisms to include FAIR and to include open science into the reviewing of the quality of the researchers and the research process, implementing procedures to select research outputs to be preserved. What research output should be preserved? All of them or some of them? Adopting PIDs to institutional services and incentivize the use of those PIDs. A lot of them use them, not everybody, and again, support is needed from the institutions. Supporting the research communities to adopt standards and increase the adoption of fair practices. An important thing. My guess is that only 2% of the research data is really fair at this moment and findable to a certain extent. And then I'm talking worldwide. This is not a data for a specific country. Supporting the publishing of semantic artifacts by institutional repositories, encouraging sharing of quality assurance software and through the institutional and thematic resources, encouraging and supporting the researchers with respect to the infrastructures to be used that can be federated into EOSC, and integrating further into the national AAI structure, enabling seamless collaboration and at the national and at the European levels. Supporting the awareness of the use of European and domain-specific semantic artifact catalogs and encouraging the institutional repositories to become machine actionable again. Not only the national level, definitely also the institutional level. I'm running over time, but I'm going to go two more slides in order to finish this presentation, Klaus. There was a request from the Commission for a separate document, an input to the Commission from the Association with respect to what are the core topics to be addressed in the next work program. And this document should provide some more details, the form of bullet points, preferably in different areas. It would be useful to have such a document in order to address the activities to be supported, so the scope, the target and the outcome of each of these activities, the estimation of the amount of money needed in order to make a difference in that domain, and then I'm talking about what should the European Commission do in that specific domain, and the nature of the activity, either a research and infrastructure thing or let's say, a coordination support action or an innovation action. This document should not be part of the SRIA, but should be a separate document which we are producing, and it should also address the WIDERA programs if possible. We used the 8 priorities we came up for 2025. So I cannot give you the outcome of this document. We are still working on that. But I can give you the 8 priorities that came out of the SRIA and the, let's say, incorporation of all the comments that came out of the SRIA. These are 8. Creating and aligning core parts of curricula, core parts of the curricula for data stewardship over Europe. A suggestion to the Commission to spend more money on that and to stimulate that. Collecting ongoing national best practices. We have heard today already they're doing a lot of that, and also the steering board is doing a lot of that. These examples and these best practices, or good practices if you want to, of things that are described in the SRIA will help others to go forward. Advancing the technical specification to support the digital objects to be fair by design, and evaluating viable options to adopt the concept of fair digital objects for the data services. So the fair digital objects approach is an interesting one to be investigated according to the community. This is the result of the community consultation. Stimulate community-specific fair metrics and data quality constraints in harmony with the fair assessment model at the international level, so making it broader than the local level. Developing and prototyping testing machine actionable research data repositories. Again, stressing the machine actionability to come forward and to be used more often. And especially in order to link them to the EOSC UNode, from which we will hear more in the unconference later on in this symposium. And by the end of 2025, we expect a sustainable initial EOS core to be up and running, and the user-driven mechanism should be developed in order to determine the selection of the most appropriate horizontal and thematic services for that. Defining the requirements at the national, local, and thematic EOSC nodes. So we have the EOSC UNode, but there will be many EOSC nodes in Europe, and especially these requirements for local, national, thematic RI EOSC nodes are important, stimulating their development. And then there will be a gap between what is being done by the procurement, what has been done by EOS Future, and the next framework program. And that gap needs a, let's say, filling in and supporting the outcome of the node in order to maintain over the time of that gap. And with that, I have dealt with the priorities we have set in the MAR, and I would thank the organizers for inviting me.
And I think we directly continue with Pantelis and then enter into the discussion afterwards.
Thanks. 3 minutes left. It was not in our agreement. Okay.
You still have 8 minutes, don't worry.
Okay, very nice. So from my side, Karel already presented a very comprehensive overview of the work that is being done for the development of the MAR for 25-27, with very, very comprehensive list of priorities in these 3 years. From my side, I would like to frame this work within the partnership and how it will actually will use this work in order to develop the work program. So yes, we are working under the framework of a co-programmed European partnership, which means that we have signed a memorandum of understanding with the EOSC Association, and there are certain provisions in this memorandum of understanding, including what we keep calling today the SRIA, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, which provides the basis for defining the annual priorities in line with the strategic plan of Horizon Europe. This is a plan that defines the overall strategy for Horizon Europe, to which we, as part of Pillar 1, need to comply. From the EOSC Association side, as Carol mentioned, there is the input and advice to the European Commission for the identification of priorities. This would be mostly coming into the multi-annual roadmap, what we call the MAR, and the definition of Horizon Europe topics, which is what Carol mentioned as one input paper coming from the EOSC Association to the Commission. The European Commission takes into account the input by the EOSC Association and the advice for the call topics preparation. And then, of course, we follow, as with all other calls in Horizon Europe, the usual comitology procedures for defining the work program. Apologies for my voice. It decided to abandon me this morning, but okay, I will try to comply. So, 3 general objectives identified in the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. This document was developed at the beginning of the partnership, and it has, in principle, a scope of 7 years of the whole duration of Horizon Europe. In fact, even 10 years. I think the partnership is supposed to last until 2030. And this is where you would see these 3 general objectives that we typically refer to, making open science the new normal, so open science practices and policies. Second is tools and services for open science, for fair data, what we also like to call this web of fair data. And lastly, the federation of infrastructures, or the more infrastructure-related, let's say, part of the work that we're doing in EOSC. These are the 3 general objectives of the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. They define the overall framing, let's say, the boundaries under which we operate. But if one goes into the document, one will see that these are broken down into specific objectives, operational objectives, and most importantly, 14 action areas. And these are a very useful set of let's say, boundary conditions under which we develop our activities. In fact, the work on the macro roadmap is the work of is actually trying to put these results of infra-EOSC projects and the additional activities of the EOSC Association, how they can match the different action areas, the 14 action areas that are identified in the SRIA. And the MAR, of course, follows the same approach of providing a roadmap for the future, how we can best deliver across these 14 different dimensions that are defined in the SRIA. Now, from the Memorandum of Understanding, we have the SRIA, and from the SRIA, we extract the priorities, which are identified in the MAR, which is part of the SRIA, and this is a very important input for the European Commission in order to define the topics under the infra-EOSC destination. So we had 6 topics in 2021, 4 topics, and of course the public procurement that is, we had this presentation in the morning in 2022 of 65 million euro. In 2023, we had 6 more topics plus 2 grants to identified beneficiaries of 70 million euros in total. Black button, which is called actually the black button. Interesting. But still doesn't work. Okay. So again, and for 2024, we foresee 5 more topics opening up in December, closing in March, if I'm not mistaken, with 61 million euros in total. And these are the a brief, let's say, 1-slide summary of what we had published for 2021 and 2022. The focus was mostly on developing a skilled workforce for European Open Science Cloud, supporting, of course, the activities of the EOSC Partnership, deploying EOSC core components for FAIR, developing services for EOSC, enabling discovery and interoperability of federated research objects. And there was also a specific topic focused on a certain thematic area, the one on supporting cancer research, following the corresponding mission, the EU mission on cancer. For 2022, there was a topic on the research assessment system that incentivizes open science practices. Another one on institutional open science publishing across Europe. There was another topic that had a thematic focus, this time on water. So support for healthy ocean, seas, coastal and inland waters, as well as a topic on global standards, specification and recommendations for open sharing and fair research data, and the public procurement on the European Open Science Cloud core and services. The outcome of these calls, we have 15 projects. I have here, I think, also projects that are not from the InfraEOSC calls, but are very much related to the work that we do in EOSC. So they are coming from different parts of Horizon, the World Fair, the BICOVID, the ERGSP7 and the STR S3. And you see here a timeline of their duration in the coming years. There is more than 330 participations in these projects with 221 unique participants from all over Europe and outside Europe, a few of them. And then for the InfraEOSC call, which is now being under evaluation and the projects should soon start, I believe they will start in the beginning of next year. We have a 6 topic on the science clusters, on software and code, on scientific knowledge production, on the core again, on the interoperability framework, on developing trusted environments for sensitive data, and the 2 grants to identified beneficiaries, one for a Horizon Europe repository that was given to CERN managing Zenodo, and the other one on a monitoring mechanism for the European Open Science Cloud, which is given to, well, it is assigned to Open Air. The latter one is now under evaluation, and hopefully we will have the results soon. These were also presented my morning, so I will not go into too much detail into what kind of areas each of these calls cover. I will move directly to the 2024 call, which will, as I said, open in December. And now the focus is on another thematic area, which is part of the EU missions, the one on climate change. This is a research innovation action of 16 million euro. We expect to fund projects under this call. The other one is a coordination and support action of 4 million euros to support the EOSC Partnership in consolidating the coordination of the EOSC ecosystem. Another coordination and support action of 5 million euros for enabling a network of EOSC federated and trustworthy repositories. Then we have area on long-term access and preservation infrastructure. And finally, one on services for EOSC Exchange. Now, how these calls were developed, as I said, this is where the MAR comes in place. They were developed by taking very much into account the input that we received through the development of the MAR 2023-2024. The same happened for 2021-2022. And a big exercise in identifying what would be the thematic areas for the different topics to develop is, as I said, how they contribute to the different action areas of the SRIA, because in the end, the purpose of the InfraEOSC destination is to deliver on the partnership. That means to deliver on the objectives that we have set out and the action areas in the SRIA. And here you see an indicative mapping of the action areas to the calls for 23-24. Of course, this is one way to identify how the different topics can contribute to different action areas. We have chosen to provide the main link and maybe a further link, but there are many ways that people can actually identify further links of each of these topics to the different action areas. What is important is the work of the macro roadmap that goes a level beyond and identifies not what the topic, not on the level of the topic and how a topic can contribute to different action area, but the level of the results of the project that is funded under the topic, which is really refined and curated. Now, moving forward to the future, Carol provided a very comprehensive list of priorities for the future. Not only priorities, I would say these are very, very specific instructions on what would be the very specific topics to keep in mind. I would like to use also the discussions that are taking place in the tripartite governance. We had a meeting in November, another one in May, and of course, the discussion on what should be the priorities for the coming years was part of the agenda. And based on the keywords and the inputs that we heard in these meetings, what I have collected here is a series, let's say, of higher level in terms of abstraction, suggestions, some indicative ideas for priorities for the future that they can maybe fuel the discussion that will come after this presentation, hopefully. So it gathered very broadly around these three objectives, starting with the one that is on the Federation of Infrastructures, the three objectives of the SRIA, the Strategic Research Innovation Agenda. So what basically one can extract out of these bullet points is that how we can make the platform, the EOS Core, the Federation a success in all possible fronts. First of all, and above all, to demonstrate the added value to the researcher, how the platform can actually reach the researcher and be an attractive tool for the researcher in Europe to use. So increase the uptake of the platform and of the Federation by the researcher. Then, of course, make sure that this is an agile construct that can improve and can adapt to user feedback and to how the researchers and the service providers will be using and will find probably new ways to make use of the platform. To develop and adopt an EOSC interoperability framework. Then, once we have this core infrastructure ready to be able to federate existing infrastructures as node within this system of systems, and then to, even at the broad scale, connect research infrastructures with infrastructures that are not necessarily focused on research, such as digital infrastructures. It was mentioned this morning, the HPC, or AI platforms that are being developed at the European level and at national and, of course, at community level. Connect even at scale with other European data spaces, because there is this big initiative under the European Strategy for Data to develop data spaces in different sectorial areas and the data space for research. So it would be important to see how this data space will connect to the other data spaces. And again, even at the broader circle, further opening up to the public and the commercial sectors, of opening up the EOSC Federation to the public and the commercial sectors. And then, of course, the current procurement will end in 2026. There is this broader discussion about what happens beyond that. So there is a need to further support these discussions, to see what will be the sustainability plans beyond 2026 in terms of what should be the right governance model, how they should be supported, and by which sources, and this. So for the other two general objectives, the web of fair data, we have the kind of inputs that we have collected is about developing fair-related practices across research communities in Europe. It is the important issue of fair data sovereignty, so how we can ensure control of the data in a way that we're not closing more than what it needs to be closed. So we have this principle of as open as necessary, as open as possible, as closed as necessary, and how we can reinforce the autonomy of research performing organizations, promoting fair data literacy and fair enabling repositories, while for the general objective of open science becoming the new normal, so practices and policies for open science, it is important to support capacity building and networking in relation to skills for open science fair practices, including data stewards. Citizen science also can be an important enabler and facilitator for citizen science projects, and collecting and learning from good practices, from demonstrators, from use cases, and the monitoring of open science across Europe. And with this, I would like to close my presentation. Pass the floor to Klaus.
Thank you very much, Pantelis. I would now like the speakers to come on stage, Eliora, Karel, and Pantelis, and each of you will get a mic. Now we can enter into the discussion. And again, I would like the audience here in the room to raise your hand. You will get a microphone. And then we start the discussion. And those of you who are participating online, please use Slido to pose your questions. And I will receive them and forward it to our panelists. Okay, so are there any questions, comments? And there's already the first one here in the first row, second row, and you take maybe one of the mics there.
Thank you. It's a question for Pantelis. It's a clarification point regarding your slide on a federation of infrastructures. You said that you wanted to connect research infrastructure with digital infrastructure. Giving the examples of EuroHPC and AI platforms, do you mean by AI platforms the TEF, testing and experimentation facilities? What is your view? Could it be the services that the TEFs will offer being put on EOSC platform? What is your view on this connection? Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much. A very good question. To clarify, this is not our proposition or our suggestion for what should be the priorities for the future. It is a collection of input we have received through discussions at the tripartite governance, which includes the European Commission, the EOSC Association, and the steering board representing member states. And it's a kind of an appetizer, let's say, for the discussion we're having now. So we are open to discuss these issues and to see what are your reflections on this. Yes, when we are saying opening research infrastructures to infrastructures that are not necessarily focused on research, TEFs could be a good example. EuroHPC is another example that was also mentioned by the director of the Connect corresponding service this morning. It seems that will be included in this procurement on the platform. So there is a scope and a rationale for opening the federation that will be created under EOSC for researchers to be able to have access to services that are not necessarily explicitly and solely focused on research, but they can make use of them. And the AI on-demand platform that is also being developed at the European level could be another good example for moving in this direction.
Thank you very much. There is a question from the middle of the room. Do we already have questions in Slido 1? Okay.
Thank you. For several of the presentations, I see that you involve several scientists, computer scientists, who are implicated in developing the EOSC software over the years. Now, my question is the following. What about people, let's say, who are in chemistry, in astrophysics, in physics, in oceanography, in different fields, who are not involved and who have never made use of these instruments, of these tools? They don't know what they exist. Sometimes they are very well funded by Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, the last 15, 20 years. But if you ask them, do you know what is EOSC means? What are the initials? They say, I never heard of these initials. So my question is, what effort is it made by the community and by your groups in order to approach these people and make all these tools more available to the community?
Thank you for the question, first of all. I think a very important and relevant question. Actually, I've been asking a similar question myself the last couple of days around, yesterday and this morning in a discussion. What percentage of the research is being done through the research infrastructures? One question. What percentage of the researchers is using high-performance computing? Think about these questions, and then you come to the conclusion that these are very relevant and important research infrastructures and e-infrastructures, and they are easy and low-hanging fruit to be collected and to be incorporated in the EOSC Federation, which we should do. It may even offer for other researchers to join as well. But the honest answer to the question, I think, is that way less than 50% of the researchers is using EuroHPC, and way less than 50% of the research being performed is using the research infrastructures. Does this mean we should not forget about the rest? We should not forget about what we sometimes call the long tail of science, those disciplines and those researchers that are not in the front of using these large-scale infrastructures, and those people that are not using EuroHPC but are still doing very relevant research. Be assured that the EOSC Association is very aware of these groups and is very aware of, let's say, linking to the organizations in the countries and in the institutions to make in the future what I call EOSC nodes in the countries, in the research organizations, in order to link them as well. So I think a very relevant question and something we should, let's say, think about more often than only today.
Okay, we have a question here in the fourth row. Before that one, I would like to take one from a Slido from our participants in Zoom, and that question relates to the repositories. The question is, why do we develop new repositories rather than supporting and upgrading existing ones? This might lead to a further fragmentation of the current situation. So the impression is that EOSC is much about developing new repositories rather than about integrating, supporting, and upgrading existing ones. Maybe we should clarify that, and who wants to go for that question? Pantelis.
Just to also quickly react to the previous question, it is important also to highlight that there is support at the level of the work program of Horizon to engage with specific thematic communities. Who was mentioned, astrophysicists, biologists. We had a very large-scale call in Horizon 2020 on clustering different thematic communities into what we call science clusters. And there is a follow-up topic now to bring these different clusters together. Of course, is this enough? Maybe it's not enough. Maybe more needs to be done in order to actually reach the researcher. And that's why we say that this should be a top priority now that we are moving into a more operational phase to be able to increase the uptake of this work by the average researcher. Now, on the topic, on the point on repositories, to my understanding, this is not what we're trying to do, to develop new repositories. What we're trying to do, also from the work program, we mentioned the topic on developing fair enabling repositories, and it is really to bring these repositories that already exist today together, so that we can actually together develop certain protocols, certain standards to increase the fairness of the data that are being provided there and the quality of the data.
I agree. Karel, you want to add? And then
Yeah, first of all, I want to fully agree with Pantelis on this. If you read the priorities which I have shown for the coming period, none of them will mention a new repository. All of them will mention existing systems implicitly to be connected to. So I would encourage the existing organizations to look forward to possibly, let's say, transform as much as needed. Most of the cases there will not be a transformation needed in order to become an EOSC node or to be part of an EOSC node in the future. I would like to come back also to the previous question, if I may, Klaus, because I think that with all respect, the European Commission with this Horizon Europe program cannot finance all the research that's being done in Europe, by far not. It is financing a small portion of the research. If I look at my own university, the Delft University of Technology, then roughly 100 million euro comes from the European Commission's funding projects, while the university is spending 750 million per year. So the contribution of that is significant, but it's not covering all the research. And we should not forget about all the things that are being done in Europe by researchers that is not financed by the European Commission, that is financed by the countries, that's financed by the universities themselves, that's financed by private funds. They are as important as all the money that is coming from the Commission and supporting the research. The one that are financed by the Commission are easy to find, are easy to locate, and are easy to connect. And that is low-hanging fruit, and we should also not forget about that.
I think this is certainly a communication challenge for us, because we are in the EOSC bubble. During the presentations we got before that discussion, different terms were used. There was the EOSC platform, EOSC node, EOSC federation, EOSC core, EOSC exchange, EOSC portal. So I can well understand that people get the impression why so many new repositories. I think it's really a communication exercise for all of us who are in the EOSC development to agree on a common language for like the EOSC whatever node, a portal, but not use so many different terms, which in the end probably refer to the same type of thing we have in mind. We have one question from the audience. We have Jessica there. Oh, now the questions pop up. And we have a couple of questions in here. Elio,
If I may, I also wanted to react to that question about the research communities. We identified that also as one of the gaps in the interviews with the project. So they are also concerned how to bring EOSC to research communities so we can work together in solving that issue. And coming from an institutional perspective, so at Graz University of Technology, of course, we have to work on all levels. So this institutional level is also important to reach out to those research communities maybe that are not involved yet. And in my opinion, you need some interfaces at the institutional level. This role can be played by data stewards, as an example, who can understand this EOSC landscape, cover the complexity, because researchers, they do not need to know about all these initiatives. They need the solutions that they can use. So in my opinion, and from our experience, data stewards play also a very important role in this aspect.
Now, you have been waiting for quite a while.
No, thank you. I was just about to say exactly what has been said. So I think this is why we are gathering in events like that. So in the end, we are the ones who can organically spread the word, not necessarily about EOSC, but the added values it brings. So the data being brought together with the infrastructures, with thematical services. So yes, EOSC will have to find a way to communicate and disseminate among long tail of science or other communities that they still don't know about EOSC. But in the end, from what we have discovered, the best approach is just to, so you have been here, you know about EOSC, then you say, hey, you know what, there is this thing going on. And if you have connections, or you can find who is, for example, the mandated organization in EOSC Association, what works really nicely is also organizing a tripartite event, for example, or asking someone from EOSC Association who would usually gladly come and spread the word. So bottom up, that's also the good idea.
Okay, thank you. I would now like to take one question from Slido, and then I go through the participants here in the room, and that question relates to the development of the infrastructures, the repositories. The question is, how should operational global domain infrastructures be integrated? What incentives are there for these established consortia to join EOSC? So it's about how to integrate the global domain infrastructure into the EOSC venture.
Let me try, and then I give the floor to the Commission. This is not an easy question, because in our definition, the European Open Science Cloud is the European edition of the World Wide Web of fair data, and I include World Wide Web in this case because we normally talk about the web of fair data, something similar than the World Wide Web of pages. So the European contribution offering additional possibilities to the European researchers paid by European money, either by the countries or the European Union, is the emphasis. Yes, the global infrastructures are important, and research is always being done at, let's say, at a global stage. Researchers work together at a global stage. Funding does not come from the global stage. I don't know of any global organization that is paying our research. So it is not an easy question to answer. I think what they should look at is how much, well, first of all, they can offer their services. Everybody can offer the services through the system. Everybody can be an observer of the association already, and providers can offer services to the European Open Science Cloud in the future if they comply with the rules of participation, if they comply with the rules Europe sets with respect to data.
I would now like to go through the hands raised from the, and then once Pantelis is done, because the people, raise all the time their hands, and I would like to give them a warming feeling that you will have the opportunity to talk. And I would like to start from the left and to the right after Pantelis made his short comment.
I feel I have to be very brief in my reply.
Indeed.
Just to mention that, of course, this EOSC is not developing in isolation, and the work that we're doing in EOSC is very much hearing, and it's in osmosis with what's happening internationally. Other countries are having the exact same issues that we're trying to solve here. We are working in international fora like the RDA, other fora, and trying to solve these problems and to adopt standards that are defined at international level and use them also in EOSC. So, in principle, it's not something that cannot happen in practice.
Now, Jessica, please.
Thank you. Hello. My question relates to the upcoming 2023 calls. So one of them was the next generation services for the operational sustainable EOS core infrastructure. How will those developing services relate to the procurement?
That will have to go back to the topic description to see what is precisely developed there. The procurement will be hopefully starting operations in the beginning of the year. The project, this call that we are now having, will actually come later because if the projects are to be starting operations in the beginning of the year, we'll not be seeing results until several months later. And I don't have a view of how this call has been developed in particular, but we can find the topic and we can see what it entails in terms of connecting to what is being developed with the procurement in the platform. It is the case for many topics, including, I guess, this one, but this we have to check, to be able to have provisions where the results of the projects that are funded under a topic need to build on results of previous projects. This is something that we commonly do in the work program so that we have some kind of continuity and of the work that is done. So I expect that something like that could also be possible for this topic.
Okay, the next question from the audience is there.
Hello. I have a question, perhaps it's an impression problem I have as a newcomer, but I'm wondering, open science for me is the digital transformation of research, what's happening. However, with digital transformation, usually with other companies, new business models pop up to make it sustainable, to make all the investments into this infrastructure and to data stewardship long-term and sustainable. And I was wondering how far is EOSC also participating with the private sector in these goal definitions? Because open science, now we're focusing on the means to reach more knowledge, but the goal, I think, is more innovation, right? So, and innovation usually happens with private partnerships.
Yeah. Again, an important question. Thank you for that. We are here to serve the community of researchers and public-funded researchers initially. We are in the long run here to create something that is even valuable for the general public. And in between, there is, of course, a phase where more and more of the, let's say, commercial providers or private parties, which are not always commercial, will be part of the show. At this moment, in the EOSC Association, for example, commercial providers can be an observer and be part of the system. If we look at, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, many of those pharmaceutical companies have already started working on fair data internally in their organizations. Some of them are very large organizations. They have also problems in finding back their data, in combining the data internally in their organization. They are not stupid. They are smart by making the data as fair as possible so they can also combine with the data that become available on the public market. These data are available already. Researchers that are funded by public research, of course, deliver their research, their results publicly, thus also to private companies. I hope that more and more of those companies will be involved in, let's say, in the development and in the structures and in the standards we're developing. And I also hope that more and more of them will partly open up their data to the general public as well. In the domain of climate change, in the domain of energy, in the domain of mobility, there's a lot of questions that are out there where a lot of the data by those organizations could help, as we have seen in the COVID case.
Yeah. Colleague there, yes.
My question is related to quantum technologies. Actually, quantum technologies are developing very rapidly, and The European Commission is investing a lot of effort and funding into the development of quantum-related technologies, infrastructure, etc. Indeed, there are remarkable actions or initiatives all around Europe on national and European level. Do you think that integration with EuroHPC will automatically bring this area on board, or don't you think that maybe some specific actions should be taken to embrace quantum on EOSC?
No, that's a good point actually, and it very much fits the purpose of this discussion, which is to hear other ideas for priorities for the future. You see that quantum is not something that we mentioned in our list of priorities. Of course, it's an important enabling technology that is being developed by different countries and of course at the European level. In EOSC, we always have this. We typically have this perspective of what is there that the researcher needs that we can provide, and if the research communities, if the quantum technologies become mature enough for researchers to actually go out and reach and need these services, then this would be a suite of technologies that should also be incorporated in the whole set of services that EOSC can provide. In terms of providing, core funding for developing these technologies, this would be more for other parts of funding rather than the one that we have under the research infrastructure, I would say.
Okay, the next question is there, and then we go to you, and then to you. Yes.
Thank you. Fotis Karagiannis from ERGSP7 and Stress-Free 3. I would like to subscribe with what Pantelis presented, the list of priorities for the next period. I guess this is a consultation with the community and the priorities for the next period, especially the federation one. Still, the federation process is slow, and it's Europe. We know many countries, many views, different priorities at national level, and so on. So the question is: do you think that there should be something more coming from the bottom up, complementing the current process with some quick projects and to develop tools? For example, there are already a lot of development, but maybe some let's say quick projects, you could consider a call for such projects and complement and maybe compete even and have some bold initiatives to work on similar, let's say, results. And the second point is about the federation of EuroHPC. Probably you know that there is also EuroHPC planning to federate its supercomputers, the 12 supercomputers. And I guess the knowledge from EOSC will be very relevant, and whether you have thought of, let's say, cooperating there further. I know that I was very glad to see this morning some links between EOSC and EuroHPC mentioned, and I guess this will be dealt with in the future, but if you want to comment on this point also, thank you.
Pantelis, I guess.
Yeah, on the point on projects, bottom-up projects, in my view at least, the work programs have always taken very due consideration of exactly what you described there. I think in every year we had more than one topics that are about developing services and tools that can be federated in the EOSC ecosystem. But as Karel mentioned, this is certainly not enough. It's not that the calls can actually do the whole job for Europe. And I think this is where the institutional funding and the other sources of funding at national and regional and community level come in, and this is where they can actually bring an added benefit in promoting this. I don't know. You are the voice of the community, right? So maybe you are the association.
Yeah, it's a slow process, and we always like to go faster, but it is a complicated process where money comes from the countries, from Europe, from other sources. Researchers are involved, and you probably know the joke, but I'll tell them anyway. Changing a university is like moving a graveyard. You don't get much help from the people inside. So we are changing the research system here, and this is a slow process, and especially in Europe, many of the processes are slow. Think about the energy transition. You cannot do that overnight, and the acknowledgement that this is important has to be there. Maybe with the energy transition, the acknowledgement of the importance is higher than the acknowledgement of the importance for every researcher to share their data. So it is a bottom-up process, and thus the combination of it is going usually as slow as it goes. Therefore, I said, starting with the low-hanging fruit is important, and for the others to follow and make suggestions for the others to be on board.
Okay, we have two further questions from the audience. First you, and then I take one from Slido.
Hi, Felipe Perez from the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. Thank you for the invitation. I guess first, I'm really happy to see the parallelisms between the problems that we have in Canada with what you guys are doing here. So congratulations on the really amazing work that you've done. My question is related to fragmentation and federation. So in Canada, we've really tried the federated model. It's really difficult, mainly because you have many stakeholders with different priorities, and because we don't really manage or own our digital research infrastructure. And so I guess my question to you is, what are the biggest challenges to ensure that you provide an equitable access and use to that digital research infrastructure that you don't manage or own? And what would be an actual success story?
Yeah, my simple answer would be it has to be community driven. It has to be a process that is wanted by the community for which it is being built. This cannot only be bottom up. It has to be top down and bottom up, and we have to offer things, let's say Europe has to offer things top down, the countries have to offer things top down, but then the community has to take them on board and has to stimulate the development. So what I've been doing in my own university, in my own research environment, is talk to the researchers every 2 weeks, to a group of researchers about open science, about open data, about fair data, about what it is and why it is important. We have this report from PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, that says if we don't make our data fair in the research domain, this will cost Europe 10 billion euro per year. I'm not sure whether that's the right number, but it's sure that if we don't do this development, it will cost more money than doing this development. Nevertheless, there are quite a number of research communities that are happy as they are, so why should they change? And this is a slow process. Any comment?
Please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jose Maria Carazo from CSIC and from Instruct Eric. The objective of having the individual research infrastructure federated in EOS sounds great. However, most of the actions that I see are through clusters or through cross-clusters actions. Have you even considered that the individual research infrastructure might not be that EOS ready as you may be taking for granted?
No, that's a very good point indeed, and I believe that we're trying at least not to take it for granted. And I guess the reason for trying to cluster them in thematic areas was also for feasibility purposes. We saw the numbers, right? We are funding under the work programs around 70 million per year, and we have around 220 participants in the Horizon Europe projects, which is, how many are the EOSC Association members? Around 300? So it's 250, so it's the same amount of members. However, you've seen the numbers from the EOSC Association contributions, they are 5 times more. There are 300, around 50 per year. So this gives a feeling of how important is the funding that we can provide through Horizon to achieve these goals compared to what the overall community can do. And what we are trying is to trigger these change, and then of course it's for the infrastructures themselves and for the ecosystem in general to make this change happen. The clustering in terms of thematic areas has also the benefit of when you bring neighborhood thematic areas together, there is some higher probability that the federation can be easier to be performed. So that something is achieved at this local, let's say, thematic level, and then it can be scaled up at the level of the EOSC. But of course, one has also to look at the individual infrastructures to see to what extent they are ready to engage in this kind of federation and to what it actually serves them to do that.
Thank you.
Carol, you want to add on that?
Yeah, well, I want to stress again that the countries, which was just said, do a lot. And these numbers we are giving to you with respect to the AAP, to be honest, only a portion, not all of our members have filled it in. So if you would multiply it with the actual number of members, assuming that the same amount would come from others, it is way over 500 million per year, way over. And I think that is realistic, what the countries are doing in data stewardship, in research, in whatever, that supports this development. So my suggestion would be follow Germany as an example to find in your country enough funds to stimulate this development in order to get it bottom-up done. If we only look at Germany with 90 million per year, 900 million over 10 years to support this development, I think this is a great example. What I did in the Netherlands is take that number, divide it by 4.8, the ratio of the inhabitants in Germany versus in the Netherlands, and suggested to our government 25 million. They gave us 20 million per year. So again, that's a good development. Today I talked to Ireland and I said, do the same thing. Take the ratio, tell your government that other governments are doing this, follow the pack.
I have now two questions in Slido related to the financing of EOSC or EOSC tools. And I will bring them up together and then you can reflect on it. The first one is, how should the synchronization of investments among national and EC calls be achieved? That is indeed an issue also in Germany because we have the huge investment in the German national research data infrastructure, and how can this be aligned with the EC calls for the further development of the EOSC. And there is a question maybe which is related to what you presented, Ilira. How can these efforts be visualized? So are there intention to visualize like what funding schemes, funding programs exist in the different member states and associated countries, and can that be linked to the current or upcoming EC calls? That could be a suggestion to you. And the next question, also related to funding from Slido, is if new EOSC tools will be funded mainly by non-EC funds, many southern and eastern European countries will have problems developing tools for their researchers. So this is the complex on financing, and I look to you, who wants to start. Ilira first.
So this would be an addition in our macro roadmap to visualize different funding schemes, as I understand it. Then we won't have the timeline, so this could be a snapshot. I guess, of course, we have the EC funding, and Pantelis provided a very good overview of the upcoming calls. And from the AAP, I'm sure we can have this information. So from the mandated organizations and also from the EOSC Association members, like research performing organizations, so which funding schemes are out there. From Austria, I can just say, of course, we have the Ministry of Education and Research, and basically the main funding for all these activities come from the ministry. Also the universities and the portion of the budget that is invested in these activities comes from the ministry. From time to time, trying to implement also our national open science policy, ministry organizes open calls where we try then to collaborate between universities to apply for a project. And I think, but we can, in collaboration with EOSC Association, we can have such a snapshot.
Thank you very much. Karel.
Well, the question about the alignment of the national funding and policies with the European one is a very important one. Therefore, we are jointly developing the SRIA, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda. We're making a new version really next year. We will go out to consult the community. And hopefully the first version of the SRIA for the first period has already helped for some countries to align what is aligning with the development of EOSC. And I'm sure that the Dutch and the, sorry, I was going to say the German first, but the German and the Dutch system are very much aligned with the priorities given in the SRIA. And we have a large program on fair data, which is completely aligned with what the SRIA offers. Now my suggestion to the less rich countries, it's not only about money, it's also about, let's say, directing activities that are already there in the direction that is important for having more, let's say, data available that are fair, that are accessible to others. If you produce data, and also these countries are producing data, there's no reason not to make them as fair as possible. There's no reason not to make them available. If you are evaluating researchers, there's no reason to look at Coara and to include in your evaluation of researchers and research processes also this type of development, and not concentrate only on publications and citations, which I see very often being done in those countries, even nationally, unfortunately. Not only those countries in general. So a lot of the activities that align with the SRIA can be done without extra money. In the end, open science is not going to give extra money. It is not about more money. Open science will ultimately be science and has the money that is available for science. We just do it in a different way, and we spend our money slightly differently. Think about 40 years ago. Nobody would spend the money on computers because there were no computers. Nobody asks now money for computers anymore because it's a normal thing in a research project to have those available. Nobody would start doing a research project only with pens and paper. Well, maybe with a few exceptions, but in general. So in the future, having your data made as fair as possible, fair by design if possible, in order to do this, you will have data stewards and you will have a different, let's say, spending of the money of research. Instead of having your 21st PhD students, I tend to say to research leaders, have a data steward.
Maybe just to add on the specific point on aligning calls, I think there was a point also made about aligning calls. The alignment of the development and the preparation of the work program under Horizon and the previous, of course, framework programs with what is happening at national level is achieved to the extent possible through the so-called comitology procedure. So there is a program committee that includes representatives of each member state that is participating and engaging in the development of the work programs. And the hope and of course the target is that by engaging in this co-creation, let's say, of the work programs with the member states can then take this into account and align further, and even, of course, feedback into the development of the work programs at the European level, align their national funding sources. And this we see happening in several countries where they try to, especially smaller countries where they may not have a very well-resourced independent research funding program, they can then focus on providing support to those areas that are less covered by the European level funding. And this we see happening in several countries. So I think this level of alignment is to a certain extent achieved. Maybe more can be done, but this is what is in the spirit of the comitology procedure we have in the development of the work programs in Horizon Europe.
Okay, we are coming to an end. Thank you very much for your contributions, and I've noted inclusion as an umbrella term to cover our discussion here. In order to include all the scientists in Europe, we need a common terminology and not so many terms which in the end refer to the same object, like EOSC Node, EOSC Core, EOSC whatever. So we need to include the researchers. In order to do that, we need a common language, a common terminology. Also, EOSC is about including all European scientists and actually also all the other scientists around the world. And this was reflected in the last discussion when we got the question about financing from the southern and eastern European countries. Of course, they should be included. There should be opportunities for them to get funding, to access funding. Maybe the WIDERA program is also an opportunity for them to join the development of EOSC tools and services. And then there was the discussion or the discussion around linking up to international infrastructures, because we are in Europe, we are not alone. We are not the only ones doing science. There are all the scientists around the world. We need to include the others need to include us. And there are ongoing discussions in different working groups to early start with the alignment of other large international research data infrastructure and the European Open Science Cloud. I would like to thank you for having been with us for the last 1.5 hours. We now have a coffee break for half an hour. Here in this room, we have then two sessions. I think the first one is on governance and the second one is on the finance, the other way around, okay? The other way around, thank you. That's a clear language, Nobody can misunderstand what you me. So number one is financing. Number two is the governance of EOSC post 2027. Thank you very much.
No, I think it was a good balance between presentation and discussion. Enough time.